Alright, this video here is about a little 4-horn air horn system that is out there on the market you can buy. It's fairly inexpensive. They don't cost that much. They come where the manifold is all in one piece and all 4 horns screw down together into that one manifold. So therefore you have one air line going into the center of the manifold. And when air goes through the manifold, it goes out to all 4 chimes at the same time. Now, again, like I said, you might find this being sold out there advertised as a train horn, but it is not a train horn. It is a air horn. And it's loud, given what it is. It's metal. The horns, chimes themselves are metal, all 4 of them. The manifold is metal. It's all cast aluminum. And it's got some fair weight for it, for the size it is. I mean, as you can see what size it is compared to my hand here. It's not like miniature, but it's not like super huge either. And when I bought it, I knew it was just an air horn and sounded it off, and it is an air horn. It sounds nothing like a train. It sounds nothing at all like a real train horn. And it's loud. I mean, it's super loud, but it's just an air horn. So if you find these being sold out there, and it's being called a train horn, it is not. It is just an air horn. And I knew this when I purchased it. But after owning it for a little bit and having it on my vehicle, going around blowing it, and yeah, I had fun with sounding it off, spooking a few people here and there. That was funny. But it just got to where it didn't work good anymore. Because at first I had 60 psi going through it, and it was loud. And the more psi you put through it, the louder it was. I got to where I was putting 90 psi through it, and it was really loud. But then it got to where it wouldn't half sound off. And so then in taking it apart, the diaphragms on it were very super thin plastic. I wish I had one here still handy to show you, but I mean, it is very, very super thin. What the measurement on it, how thickness of it is, I don't know. I never checked it, but anyhow, they're trash now. And I went to make some new diaphragms. I wasn't going to make a video on this, but then after I did everything I did, the modifications to it, and had the ending result, I'm very satisfied with it. It's now a train horn. This baby is now a train horn. It's a 4-horn train horn. But I'll get into the specifics of what I did later. First off, I tried the Coke can lid, not Coke can, coffee can lids, little plastic lids, and cut them out into a diaphragm, and they work good, but just not as good. Then I tried the a metal, like the bottom of the metal coffee can. Tried it, and it still just didn't do good. I tried a few different things as the diaphragm, and it just never had a good sound to it. It was always just, bleh, I don't know how you could describe it, but ended up getting some Lexan. So like the plexiglass, most of you know what the Lexan is. Let me get it out of my drawer here. Alright, this is the Lexan. The thickness is on here somewhere. If I ain't cut it off already. Yeah, I guess I cut it off. It's it's 0.093 or something like that. Anyhow, it's the Lexan. You can see it's not real thick. It's a thin sheet of it, but it's Lexan. It don't break. I mean, you can bend it and stuff, and it won't break. But it's super strong, and it worked great for these right here. Now, originally, I took these caps off, which are plastic. Everything about the horn is metal except for these caps. These are hard plastic on the cap. And inside there were the diaphragms at. Like I said, it had a super thin piece of plastic real flimsy, like paper, plastic, as the diaphragm, and around the bell housing here was paper. It had a sheet of paper, one sheet of paper on one side of the plastic as the gasket. And that was a joke. So anyhow, in my experimenting, I tried some craft foam. It comes in sheets, and I cut it out and made some craft foam here. In fact, this is one of the Lexan diaphragms I made here. And then trying to tune it. This one here, I was shooting too much PSI through it, and it did push through the diaphragm. I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's a crack right here where I'm touching, and so therefore I had to replace this one. But plus this craft foam just wasn't creating a good seal like I needed, and it was aggravating. It's got sticky on one side, so that's why it's stuck to the sheet now. But what I ended up finding that would work was these rubber seals here. They were the perfect size. I didn't have to cut and trim them because they had the center hole already. And what they actually are is a flush valve seal for your toilet. They go on the rear tank of your toilet. And so I got 2 for each bell. As you can see, I got one on the top, one on the bottom of the diaphragm. Now also the diaphragm, I wished I had a made video from the get-go of doing this process, because I'm not going to go back now and take this apart to show you exactly what I did. But inside here, where the diaphragm's at, you got the part of the tube chamber right there that sticks out touching the diaphragm. Well, after you putting these thicker gaskets in, that wouldn't touch the diaphragm. So what I did is I took some PVC. Let's see if I got a piece up here. Well, anyhow, I took some PVC. This right here is a little thin wall. It's a 1/2 inch PVC, little thin wall 1/2 inch PVC, and I cut off maybe 1/4 inch, evenly and flush. Sanded it smooth and took that in there, and the little pipe that sticks out, I took, and using plumber's pipe cement, I glued it in place and just let it sit there. Once it dried, it was hardened and it wouldn't move. It was good, and it stuck up ever so slightly above the flush point right here. Therefore, if you put the diaphragm against it, the diaphragm didn't touch. And then when I put this against it, it all matched together, and the diaphragm was pushing against the PVC I had glued in place. Good and flat and smooth. And I did all 4 of them that same way. Now also on the inside of here, it had like a little ridge just inside that ring that pushed out against the back of the diaphragm to push it in against that tube. Well, I didn't want that, because that messes with the flex of the diaphragm as the air is going through it. So I trimmed that out, so therefore there's nothing pushing against the back of the diaphragm now. This is just a cap over the back of the diaphragm, and the only thing touching the diaphragm other than these seals is the piece of pipe inside the bell housing there. Right now, and that had the bell housings inside the manifold good to go. And as far as the horns, originally they screwed straight into that pipe and had a little rubber ring seal that went around the base of them that sealed off when it threaded into the chamber there, or into the manifold. But even though I modified the manifold and each diaphragm, just using those horns at the length they were would not give a train horn sound. It still sounded just like a very awful dying cow, duck air horn. So what I did is I took some PVC steel, and you can see I got these couplers here. It's just a 1/2 inch PVC coupler using some schedule 40 half-inch pipe, and this side's a male coupler, and on this end's a female coupler. The horn screwed down into it. The threads didn't match up exactly, but little work, little force, used a little heat gun, and made it secured up in there real nice and good. And also put some thread tape on the threads of the horn to help seal it up. And then each section I also did use PVC once I got PVC glue. Once I got it to the right length it needed for the right tone, then I glued it up nice and good. And also put thread tape on here before screwing it back down in there. And it took a lot of work of tuning to get these horns right, but I used the horn tune setup I used was a K3LA, and then off of that I just added an extra one. I'll tell you right here exactly what horn setup I did use. I got it wrote down here. Let's see. Okay, for the number 1 bell was a D sharp at 311 hertz. Number 2 bell was an F sharp at 370 hertz. Number 3 was an A sharp at 470 hertz. And number 4 bell was a B at 494 hertz. It took a lot of tuning, trial and error, to get these things right. But I now have them right. And when you sound this thing off, it is super loud and it sounds just like a train. But thing is, I'm only using 30 psi. At 30 psi, these things work great. I'm not going to put more than 30 psi to them. I don't want to risk blowing out the diaphragm, because even though this is Lexan, like I said on this one right here during my experimenting, I did blow out the diaphragm here a little bit, even though it's super strong and you can bend it and it don't break. I guess just too much psi went to it and blew it out. But like I said, at 30 psi, these horns sound awesome. They are a train horn now. I'm going to finish touching it up here, because this one I've modified and made. It's not going back on my vehicle. This one's going on one of my boys, one of my son's vehicle. Got him an air compressor tank and all set up. Something's falling in the shop here. But I'm going to also the original screws. Some of the original screws to hold that, because they're real short, only like 1/4 of an inch long. Some of them went in good and they're holding, but some of them just wouldn't catch. So I had to modify that and put in a different type of machine bolt with a nut on the back of it, and got all that working good. But all these these extra long ones that are sticking up, I'm going to trim those off, and then I'm going to put the horns back all on here together and repaint this base. I've already painted the horns themselves, but I'm going to repaint the manifold base, and then this will be good to go. Once all that's done, I'll blow these things again to show you what they sound like, and you will see that this, what once was a 4-chime air horn, is now a 4-chime train horn. Alright, now these once upon a time air horns, which are now train horns, are completed, all painted up. Everything is completed. Here you see I got a 1.5 inch pipe, which is just to give it some more can't think of the word. Yeah, it just gives it an extra airflow, a major push to start with. Again, like I said earlier, the max psi that I'll use on these horns is 30 psi. Alright, now I'm fixing to bark them for you and sound them off, and you'll see that they sound just like a train horn. But hang on, I better get me some earplugs. Okay, back again. I got my earplugs on now. Don't want to deafen myself, so here we go. might notice a little bit of a slight squeak when they first start to sound off, but hey, in the long run they sound great. Okay, to go over it one more time, I can't remember if I covered it all, but anyhow, on the air horn, which I modified to make them into train horns, took the original horn, which each horn here, bell, is the original. They're all metal. The main body is metal. Now here, what I'm pointing at is a Schedule 40 PVC. It is a male coupling, 1/2 inch male coupling, and it's screwed down into the base of the manifold, and then the horn or bell is screwed down into it. No modification to it other than just had to force, because the threads didn't exactly match up, had to sort of force thread it into the coupling, the female end of the coupling, because this is a male female. And well, correction, I'll take that back. There is no thread on this side. It's a smooth fitting for the PVC to slide into, and on this end that's screwed into the base of the manifold is threaded male end of the coupling. So on here I had to I can't remember exactly what I did, but I made it fit. I sort of forced it down in there. It didn't slide in easily. I sort of force threaded it down in there and used some cement, just regular PVC cement, and sealed it up good and tight, and it works. It's got a good tight hold and it's sealed airtight. And on this one, the again got the male coupling, and here is a female coupling. The horn or bell is actually threaded into this coupling. Again, the threads didn't exactly match up, so I sort of had to force it in. You can see it's not even seated quite all the way down, but it's in good enough that it's sealed and it's good and tight. And then between the male coupling and the female coupling, there's a short piece of PVC. And on this one, if you can tell, again, got a male coupling that's screwed down into the manifold, and here's the female coupling that the bell is screwed down into, and between there is a short piece of PVC. And also, if you can tell, compared this one compared to this one, you can see that the male coupling is shortened. So I had to, in trying to work on the fine tuning of these bells, I had to cut down this the end that the PVC pipe slides into. I had to cut it down a little over half, about 2/3 of the coupling. I actually trimmed off there. I used my Dremel tool and trimmed it off and put a very short piece of PVC between the male and female couplings. And then here on the number 1 bell, again, you can see male coupling screwed into the manifold. There's female coupling here that the bell is screwed down into, and between there is a piece of PVC. Now you can see that these two couplings aren't touching, so that means that the PVC section in between these two couplings is just a hair longer, to the point that these couplings won't touch. Here the couplings are touching, even though you might see a slight gap there. In some sections they are touching, because when I trimmed it off, it wasn't exactly 90-degree flush, but it works. It worked out. So like I said, this one, oh yeah, let me see here. Yeah, I forgot to mention. Alright, this female coupling here, you can see I trimmed it down too. So I trimmed down the male coupling on this end and the female coupling on this end, with a short piece of PVC section between the two. Here, the male coupling I didn't modify, but the female coupling I did modify. You can see I trimmed it down shorter, because if you look over here at this male and female coupling, there's no modification to the male coupling or the female coupling, and that's the full length of these two. But here you can see there's modification on the female coupling, and here you can see there's modification on the male and female coupling. Like I said, it took a lot of work of fine-tuning these horns, these bells, to get them just right. And of course you can't tune all four horns together, and as you see that this is one line in to this manifold, so therefore when the air goes through this one line input, air comes out through all four sections of the manifold. So in order to be able to tune one horn at a time, I use this coupling plug cap, not a coupling, but this plug cap here, and I threaded it down to 3 of the manifold bell housings, and so that way I'd only have one open at the time. So as I worked on one, 3 of them were plugged up, and so I worked on, for example, number 1 bell here, the longest one, the lowest tone, it would be open and the other 3 would be closed up with one of these caps. And of course I put some PVC pipe threading around it to give it a good airtight seal while I was doing that. And in doing so, I think that's, in tuning, that's whenever I blew through 2 of my diaphragms actually, because I was putting too much pressure through it, and air couldn't go anywhere because it was capped off and it blew through. So anyhow, a lot of work, a lot of tuning. Took me a lot. Okay, my video stopped on me. All right, but as I was saying, it took me a lot of fine tuning to get these things right. I actually started off with PVC section between the coupling without the couplings being trimmed or modified down any at all. I started off with PVC section, probably about 6 inches on each section. Kept trimming it down, kept trimming it down. It took me a lot to get to where it was, and finally trimmed the PVC section down as short as it would go. And then I realized, oh, I got to go shorter than that. So the only way to do it was I trimmed down the, again, my recording stopped on me. But the only way, as I was saying, trimmed it down, the PVC section, pipe section, I just kept trimming it down, and eventually got to where I couldn't trim the PVC section any further because these couplings were touching. So the only way to get it shorter was to actually trim down the coupling itself. So that's what I had to do here on the number 1 bell. The number 2 bell ended up where I had to trim both sides of the coupling, or both coupling pieces. The number 3 bell did not require any modification to the coupling. It worked out perfectly with the bell, the horn screwed straight into the coupling screwed straight to the manifold, and it worked out perfectly. And then the number 1 bell, number 4 bell, worked out where didn't have to modify the couplings here either. Just screwed the bell or the horn into the female coupling, little short piece of PVC section so that the two couplings were touching, and then the male coupling screwed down into the manifold, and it worked out perfectly. And so therefore I just got quick and easy lucky on tuning the number 3 and 4 bells. But when it comes to the number 1 and number 2 bells, oh, it was tedious. Anyhow, but it all got worked out. And now this once upon a time air horn is now a true sounding train horn. So like I said, I used the K3LA tune frequencies and tones, and I just added 1 to it. So if you want to call it, I used I think it was number 4 off of K5LA, because I've seen no 4-horn train horn notes that I could go by, and so this is my own version of it. Like I said, I went from a K3LA, added a number 4 note to it, and I guess if you want to say it sounds like a K4LA, you could call it that, or call it whatever you want to call it. Anyhow, it definitely sounds like a train now coming down the road. See here, I got an extra manifold, though it's not needed. A lot of people who make these train horns, especially Dozerbor Miller, because I got his plans. I'm gonna make, also in the process of making some actual PVC train horns, and I'm gonna make the K5 LA train horns. He recommends having a manifold like this, but of course I only got one input to the horn manifold, so I don't need several outputs going to each horn, so I just did this. Don't really need it because they sound good without it, but figured what the heck, I'd make it, and I did. This is a 1.5 inch Schedule 40 PVC. As you see, I just got a round off bell shaped end cap on that end, and the same thing on that end, and just screwed me a airline fitting into it and secured the hose down on top of it. So this one's complete, set up the way it is. Now all I got to do is just put it on the car and hook it up to the system, and it'll be good to go. And this is going in my son's car, one of my son's car, and it's going to have a little pull valve, air pressure release valve, to so he can sound them off. And again, these right here are going to be it's going to be hooked up to a regulator, so that no more than 30 psi will be going to these horns, and that's all it needs is 30 psi. And so by him having a 120 psi system, then it'll give him several blasts before his air pump will even kick in. All right, well, that's it.